What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. Hey, Jason, could you chat about the Spurs and Wemby's 10-block triple-double? So obviously, just by those of you guys who've been following the show for a while, you know kind of the format. And the format is we really zero in on the top 10 to 15 teams in the league. And so I don't spend a ton of time talking about the Pistons or the Wizards, or the Charlotte Hornets, and the San Antonio Spurs. It's just I devote my attention towards the top teams in the league. And so I haven't been following the Spurs super, super closely, but I've been following them somewhat. And honestly, the biggest thing that's changed with Wemby over the course of the last third of the season has been his efficiency. It's just his shot selection has been way better, and you're starting to see him basically take a leap right before our eyes in the NBA. But to put it simply, I think Wemby's a few years away from being the best player in the world. That's the type of potential that he has. And we're seeing stuff from him that we've just simply never seen before. And he's doing all of this around the worst collection of ball handling I've ever seen on an NBA team. I like Devin Vassell. He's a good player. But if you really take all of the Spurs ball handlers together, that's why I keep seeing these clips on Instagram of Wemby being frustrated that he's not getting the basketball. It's because he's playing alongside a team that really struggles to kind of take advantage of what he's great at. And they're a sneaky team to keep an eye on for Trae Young this summer if the Hawks decide to rebuild. And when they actually put some quality veterans around this guy that know how to play, he's going to be such an incredible force multiplier for them. I'm so excited to cover Wemby more closely in the future. But obviously, this show is very heavy on deep dives on the best teams in the league. We cover every single playoff game and all the X's and O's. We dive into the top of the league, right? And so the Spurs, I just think, within the next couple of years are just going to be in that mix, and we'll cover them more closely. So I apologize to Spurs fans that we haven't been as intent on covering Wembanyama's rookie year, but I promise the show is going to have a ton of Wembanyama on it in the long run. Jason said that the Clippers are fourth in his contenders, but I remember him switching the Clippers with the Bucks from 4 to 3. You're right. I think I just misspoke yesterday. I do have the Clippers above the Bucks as of right now. That said, all my contender list is kind of in flux right now. I'm going to be doing about this time next week, actually, sometime Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm going to be doing a video with Sam Vecini where we dive into all the contenders and just kind of rank them and go back and forth about that. So whatever the contender list may or may not be at this point, I plan on just completely reevaluating it when we get to that point and kind of putting teams into tiers from there. So looking forward to that next week. Next question. I agree with Jason that Rudy Gobert had a very impactful game yesterday, but I have seen it far too often come playoff time. Ty Lue will make him functionally unplayable in defensive settings. I think last night was just a one-off. The Clippers will still beat Minnesota in a 7-game series. So it's hard to say. I do think that last night was, or 2 nights ago, I should say, was a little bit of one of those games where the scoreboard doesn't really represent the gap between the two teams. Particularly, it wasn't the Clippers' best defensive effort, and the Timberwolves have a tendency to fall apart offensively at the end of games, and that's one of those things where I think if the Clippers bring a different defensive level of intensity, they contain the Wolves better, which allows them to get out and transition more and avoid the set defense more. And I do think that these teams are pretty close. And between the two, if I had to pick one in a series, I do lean slightly towards the Clippers. That said, the Rudy Gobert thing is not the reason why. The Rudy Gobert narrative over the last 5 years is pretty unfair on him, to be honest. And honestly, he's directed towards the wrong side of the floor. In Utah, he was playing alongside really poor perimeter defense. Royce O'Neal was the 1+ defender that he was playing alongside most of the time, whether it was Donovan Mitchell or Mike Conley or Bojan Bogdanovic. It was a lot of, and again, Donovan Mitchell's having the best defensive season of his career now, but he was not a very good defensive player in that stretch of his career. And so more often than not, when you're the back line guy and the first guy is just getting toasted off the dribble, you step up. Now the defense is in rotation, and it doesn't really matter if Rudy Gobert is the best rim protector or one of the best rim protectors in the league because he's just not at the rim anymore. Now he's being pulled off onto some other player, especially against a good driving kick team. And that more often than not was what caused them problems. Honestly, any sort of legitimate criticism towards Rudy Gobert as a playoff player centered on the offensive end of the floor. His ability he has a little bit of stone hands. He can struggle to catch the ball and pick and roll. Finishing around the rim can be an adventure for him from time to time. Against a switching team, he's not the kind of guy that can go beat a switch down low on the block, typically. That was where a lot of his issues would arise in the past. But one of the things that he did against the Clippers in that game was like, oh, you switched and now Kawhi's on him, and he's kind of there's a baseline drive and he's kind of relocating to where the charge circle is. Like, well, this time he caught it and he bodied Kawhi and rose up and dunked on it. Or being another big one for Rudy is just being super active on the offensive glass. If you're not catching and finishing around the rim, if you're struggling in these other ways, if you can generate additional possessions or get putbacks, that's worth a ton offensively as well. And I do think that Rudy's made enough improvement in those areas over the last few years that he's at the least a very positive player in the playoff setting. I don't see Rudy getting played off the floor. That's just not an issue that I'm concerned about for the Timberwolves. Next question. What would Jason Tatum have to do to be the number one player on a championship team other than pull up threes? So the big one that I always talk about here is the physical imposition on the game. And the example that I would use is the difference between, let's say, Jokic versus Embiid, or like a LeBron versus a KD. And I mean, again, KD's an amazing playoff player, so I don't want to undercut that. But LeBron's been a better playoff player than him in his career, right? And Embiid's an incredible player, but Jokic has clearly been a better playoff player than him. And the thing is if you really dig into it, Embiid's got more high-level isolation, crazy footwork from the mid-range and in face-up situations. That jab step jumper is nasty, and he's got all of this high-level stuff from the perimeter, and same goes for Kevin Durant. But when you get into these super physical playoff environments, when you're fatigued and the defensive intensity goes up a level, not just for the opponent, but for you as well, and now your legs are more tired than you used to be, and now your rhythm and timing and all your shots is different. When all that stuff changes, a lot of times the more perimeter-oriented stuff can kind of decrease in effectiveness. And so the guys that have the ability to actually be the person that's better at absorbing those blows, and so they fatigue less, and they're good at generating higher quality shots around the rim, or maybe they get to the rim and generate really high quality shots from the perimeter. That sort of thing just translates better, especially when we get to the later rounds of the postseason. And that to me is why Nikola Jokic has been a more impactful playoff player. Embiid gets there, the jump shot stops falling, his effectiveness tanks. Now, obviously, injuries have played a role there, but that's the basketball stuff that's happening. It's the jumper that consistently fails him. Nikola Jokic, it's if the jumper's going in, great, but he's making all these hook shots and floaters and shit that's right by the basket. And it just has more resiliency as the level of intensity goes up. And the same thing goes for LeBron. LeBron can just thrive in rock fight basketball. And so on the Tatum front, that's what I'm begging for from him. Jason Tatum is one of the most gifted athletes that we have in the league. Just go down the best players in the league. Is he a more gifted athlete than Luka Doncic? Yeah. Luka's best attribute is size, and I don't want to undercut him as an athlete, but I think Tatum's a better athlete if you factor in all of his tools, strength, length, vertical athleticism, all that stuff, side-to-side speed, all that stuff, right? Is he a better athlete than Jimmy Butler? Yeah. Is he a better athlete than Paul George? Yeah. Now that he has all this strength, he's not as strong as Kawhi, and I think I'd probably take Kawhi as an athlete over him overall in the playoffs, but he's pretty close to that level. He has that capability to be deeply impactful in a physical environment. I'm saying that I'd like to see him devote a ton of energy and attention towards physicality around the basket, because that to me is going to be what carries him to the title one day. Being the biggest, strongest athlete on the floor and actually using that to his advantage instead of bailing teams out by taking higher difficulty shots.